NBA legend Charles Barkley slamming politicians for what he calls race baiting. Listen.
Man, I think most white people and black people are great people. I really believe that in my heart. But I think our system is set up where our politicians, whether they're Republicans or Democrats, are designed to make us not like each other so they can keep their grasp of money and power. They divide and conquer.
Well, meanwhile, Jason Riley of the Wall Street Journal writes in the Journal that he thinks Democrat politicians are stuck in 1964 when it comes to how they treat African-American voters. So should we be worried that the president's policies could be setting minorities back economically? Let's get the read from political strategist Tezlyn Figaro. Tezlyn, good to see you. Thank you for being here. What do you think of Charles Barkley's statement?
Well, I think what Charles Barkley's statement is basically Charles being Charles. The bottom line is there is certainly voter suppression when we talk about the argument that those who are poor do not necessarily have the access to be able to get the documents. If Republicans certainly want to believe that everyone should have an ID, then let's talk about how we can put those resources in the community so that they can do so. But the more important thing is voter depression, giving folks a reason to vote and motivating them to go to the polls. That is what most of folks like me, are concerned about. People will certainly get out to vote if they have the motivation to do so, and that is why Joe Biden now is being challenged from those within the Democrat Party to deliver on his promise, and student debt being one.
Well, Tezlyn, on your first point, the Georgian politicians would tell you that, in fact, if individuals are not able to get a photo ID, there are about 200,000 Georgians of voting age who don't have a driver's license, for example, but they could go to the state and get an ID for free, a photo ID. They could also use their bills as proof of residence, their gas and electric bill, or other means. And here's what Jason Riley said specifically. We put it up on the screen briefly. Let me put it up again. Why treat the black electorate like helpless children? It's clear that when blacks are sufficiently motivated, they have little trouble meeting the same requirements that other groups meet and casting a vote. And in fact, he goes on to point out that blacks voted at a higher rate than whites did in 2008 and 2012, despite supposedly racist laws back then. Of course, you talk about motivation. They had the motivation of voting for the first black American president, and that was a big motivation. So what do you think of what Jason said?
Well, it's two parts to it. This is not just one piece, of the puzzle. One is, yes, folks need to be motivated by policy, not just because it was the first black president, but policy. But secondly, it is real easy to say that, oh, yeah, it's so simple. You can just go down, and get an ID and show your paperwork and it will be free. There has been studies that have also shown that fees are associated with getting those documents that you need, for example, Social Security cards, birth certificates, and so forth. So it's not as easy as people think. Those of us like you and I that use our ID and have access to get an ID is certainly easy for us, but that does not apply when we talk about our elderly who vote in substantial numbers and those who are poor. So if it was not a big deal, then why is so much legislation being passed now to suppress those votes? So I think it's a balanced conversation that we both need to have on both sides of the aisle that includes voter suppression as well as voter depression. Both do apply. Both things can be true at the same time.
Tezlyn, how do you deal with the fact that we had blacks voting at a higher rate in 2008, 2012, and then in the Pew Research Center found that in the 2018 midterm, when of course President Obama was not in the race, all major racial and ethnic groups saw historic jumps in voter turnout. So it didn't hurt in 2018. Why should it hurt now?
Well, it's not about how many black people voted for Joe Biden. For President Obama. It's about access for all black people to vote.
Yeah, but this was in the midterms in 2018 when President Obama wasn't in the race.
Regardless. Yeah, it's regardless.
Why
they also
regardless?
Did that because... Well, because regardless, like I just said, it's not about just those black people voting, but all people having access to be able to vote. And I pose the same question to you on the Republican side. If they believe that black people can still get to the polls, why is it that this substantial amount of legislation has been pushed through? Well, the answer is because the Republicans lost. That's just the bottom line. And I criticize the Democrat Party as well. They have to also move forward with policy so that they can continue to win in 2022 and 2024. But at the same time, this legislation was pushed through because Republicans lost. And so they're doing everything to be able to keep people from the polls. It's not hard to figure it out.
By the way, aren't the poorest people in Georgia, the poorest businesses, going to be affected the most by these boycotts?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question. I actually ran a business in real time, a staffing firm that went through the 2011 NBA All-Star game. So I was able, just myself, I can only speak from experience, I was able to challenge the NBA as well as make sure that my employees were taken care of while they were on strike. And at the same time, went back and negotiated a higher rate for those to be paid. So the bottom line is,
good for
both
you.
things can be done.
Unfortunately, a lot of businesses we've been talking to are having a lot of trouble with it. But Tezlyn, we thank you for your opinion. Good to see you here. Appreciate it. Well, President Biden's plan to raise corporate taxes, finding an unlikely